Minister making her way up from that conference room where she delivered South Africa's national statement at this year's iteration of the Commission on the Status of Women. She is, of course, my guest in studio now here at UN headquarters. Maite Nkoana-Mashabane, always good to see you. The last time we spoke, you were the International Relations Minister, also in New York. I welcome you back as Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. Welcome.
Thank you, Sherwin, and hi.
Achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs, right? That's the theme of this year's CSW 66. What does this theme, Minister, mean in the South African context? What does it mean for your role as the Minister responsible for women's equality in South Africa?
Well, it means everything to all women around the world, but in particular in South Africa and the African continent, because lack of adaptation and things getting worse as disaster goes up and up. It is the women who have to keep doing what they know best. Take care of communities and their households. It makes it more difficult if risk becomes even more further. When, like the women we met with in Limpopo just a week ago, farmers who were complaining about the difference between owning a farm and not having access to water, that it doesn't make their life difference. That lack of heating methodologies, like for cooking and for lighting and for heating, makes their lives even much more difficult.
Yeah.
Women farmers were saying also that a lack of access to finance, as I said, makes it even more difficult. But also, if the seeds, because of climate change,
right,
the seeds that they would have used and tried to keep for the year coming get wasted because the climate has turned not the way they know things to be.
Yeah.
So they must go find money, and something they don't have.
So let's talk then about what a CSW does for those rural women, right? When we talk about women and girls in the context of disasters, in the context of climate change, in the context of conflict, Minister, you'll know that it's women and girls that are disproportionately affected, right? So when we talk here at CSW about gender equality in the context of climate change, you are looking specifically at jobs of the future, the reskilling of women, to position them better for what is now known as the green economy or the blue economy. Am I summarizing it correctly, right?
Very much so. Women are very practical because they care about the being. So if you discuss climate change in the air and doesn't reflect on how it affects real people, where they live, and the suggestions they make, like get more skills, get more education, help us adapt, make the North pay up for that which they promised to do, because we are partly in this mess because of the past.
You're talking about the just transition, right? What developed countries need to do to support developing states.
CSW 66 has made CSW much more relevant by linking the challenges that comes with climate change and women and what women have gone through.
I mean, let me just tell you what South Africa has said, right? South Africa has called gender equality, coupled with climate change and environmental disasters, the greatest sustainable development challenge of the present time. I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's the two pillars, essentially, at the United Nations. It's climate change and gender equality. And CSW, under South Africa's chairmanship, has really put those two issues front and center.
Very much so. As our President Ramaphosa had said several times, and we continue to say, come climate change, COVID-19, and gender-based violence and femicide, it became triple challenges that women had to deal with at the same time.
The triple C's, I suppose.
Very much so.
Right.
But also, with COVID, he kept saying, you know, this is like women have now to deal with pandemics, not one, not two, that they had nothing to do about.
Let's talk a bit about the COVID-19 pandemic. CSW 61 looked specifically at women's economic empowerment in a changing world. I know there will be a review of those outcomes at this year's session, but also you will look at how there was also going to be an interactive dialogue harnessing COVID-19 recovery for gender equality and a sustainable future. So it begs the question, Minister, to what extent, and I mean we know a little bit about this, to what extent has COVID-19 set South Africa's development trajectory, particularly around women's empowerment and equality? How much has it set it back?
Well, it had set it back in one way, that women hawkers had to go back to their back rooms to do nothing but to not be sure of their next meal. It brought...
Get deeper into poverty,
deeper into unemployment, deeper into inequality. So all these big challenges, you talk COVID-19, women suffered all that.
And of course we saw a big surge in gender-based violence, which of course is a big issue for South Africa.
Very much so, because men, misogyny, and inferior men who would have lived somewhere and not come back home, well, if they come back not on time, felt underutilized. And if they were beaten up somewhere, they must, do what they know best. So we saw more women killed by their loved ones than ever before. So gender-based violence went on an upsurge, and women had to bear the brunt.
President Ramaphosa signed 3 anti-GBV bills into law just last month: the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Bill, the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Bill, and the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill. This is indeed great progress, right, under your watch as a minister responsible for this kind of thing. But we also hear, Minister, that the key to the success of this new legislation is capacitating institutions like the South African Police Service and other entities, social development, for example, the department, with human capital and technical resources to implement themselves. We often in the gender equality empowerment debate hear that there is good legislation on the books, but it's not being implemented. How do you capacitate the functionary part of the state that needs to implement this legislation?
We need to do all that which you have just said now. Capacitate even ministries like ours. Capacitate the police, yes. Capacitate NPA, justice. Capacitate our courts. But capacitate you.
Individuals, men in particular.
Individuals, men in particular. From youthful stage, capacitate society. Make our laws as good as the human beings feel. They also must wake up and contribute to making that which we sign off real. Because you only live once.
Are you seeing, you've not been the Minister of Women for that long, right? But my experience in having these conversations is we've heard the same thing for a very long time, but are you seeing the requisite change, Minister?
I am seeing, I wouldn't say the requisite change.
Women are still dying. At unprecedented rates.
Well, women died more during COVID. Women die more because of people who feel inferior, I guess. We see misogyny and patriarchy thinking they must also be in the competition. That's why I say the good laws, and thanks to the President and Minister of Justice and police and all members of the Interministerial Commission and all.
The all-of-government approach. The all-of-government approach.
All-of-government approach. And the new method of district management of communities.
Right.
But it all takes you and me to rise up and make the difference.
The airwaves, let's get back to kind of the discussion we're having here at the UN now around climate change. The airwaves in South Africa tend to be dominated by what your cabinet colleague, the Minister of Energy, Mantashe, is saying about South Africa's energy mix and the role of coal in South Africa, in South Africa's future energy mix. You know that this runs counter to what the United Nations is saying about the urgent need, Minister, to transition away from coal to what they're calling this net zero future by 2050 is the big deadline. Given the theme of this year's CSW, is there not a greater role for a department like yours to play a far bigger role in terms of the role women need to play in terms of South Africa's clean energy future? Is this conversation being dominated by one ministry perhaps when yours should be playing a far greater role?
Wherever we go, like I said, we met with more than 100 women farmers. They talk of alternative or energy mix, yes, because today is 2022. There will be 2050. In between, there must be something on the table to eat. Children must go to school. We should be getting alternative skills. We need to be playing in both the blue and the green economy. So I think the debate is positive, but it should be helping us to say, what do we deal with the here and now, and how do we come up with a just transition, as we spoke about earlier.
Minister, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has cast a pall over so many events here at the United Nations, no less CSW, particularly in the context of the disproportionate impacts that conflict in general have on women and girls. The situation in Afghanistan comes to mind. Tigray, Ethiopia, another conflict area. Women and girls are the hardest hit victims in conflict, be they issues of disaster, issues of climate disruption. There is, of course, a growing concern that the Sustainable Development Agenda is at risk because of the global implications of what we are seeing in Ukraine. I know you have worn an international relations hat in the past, so this might not be completely outside of your domain. What does the path look like going forward, particularly the responsibility of the bigger states?
Bigger states, smaller states, leadership needs to do more dialogue, more jaw, less war. Because, as you rightfully say, at the end, it's women and children who bear the brunt more.
Your message to Russia and the United States is what exactly?
Let them do the jaw. Talk, dialogue. Play the big boys that champions peace, so that women and girls can feel safe in their neighborhoods and thrive. So will our nations and our communities.
Minister, thanks for dropping by. It's always good to see you in New York.
My pleasure.
Maite Nkoana-Mashabane is South Africa's Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, speaking to us here in her role as the chair of and the leader of South Africa's delegation to CSW 66 Tshepiso, where we are discussing the nexus between women's equality and climate change mitigation and adaptation. It's back to you in Johannesburg.